Another subject that I wanted to go into is mother enmeshment. You touched on that last time, and there were several questions. So, mother enmeshment, what is it? What does it look like? Is it harmful? And if it is harmful, tell us.
Well, at some point early in childhood, you want your mom and dad to be somewhat enmeshed with you.
Right.
Right? It's like mom and dad need to be overly concerned, overly protective, overly structured because, this is a child and a child needs those guardrails and needs
Right.
that direction and things like that. So I get concerned about mother enmeshment when it's appropriate for boys, especially, to separate from their mothers. And, this starts around 14, 15 years old. And the brain is changing, the male brain, the boy's brain is changing, and he's going to want to take more risk, and he's going to kind of push against mom because mom is nurture and stay with me, hold on, I'm going to hold on to you, I'm going to keep you safe, right? And boys need this sort of I want to go out into the world and I want to test the world and I want to test myself, and that usually runs against the nurture type of love compared to the father's acceptance type of love. So mother-son enmeshment starts with when the boy pushes away from mom, and it's natural and healthy to do so. Mother overpowers the son and says, "You're not getting away from me. I'm holding on to you, and you are here. I'm here to be your mom, and you're going to be my little boy forever." So the enmeshment is that there's no separation of self. It's a problem when guys come to me and say, my mother still is saying these things. And I'm like, and what are you doing about it? Well, what am I supposed to? I don't want to hurt her. I'm like, well, there's a thing called necessary wounding. And it's really a part of male initiation. And it really has something to do with boys separating from their mothers and mothers realizing that they can no longer, be the mother to that boy.
Necessary wounding.
Yes.
That looks like what?
Well, it looks like this. In New York, when I was back in the day in New York, and I'd have mothers come to me because I did all these parent conferences, and they'd say, well, my son, I can't believe it. We have all these wonderful schools in New York and in the Northeast and, great schools. And why does my son want to go to school in Los Angeles? I'm like, to get away from you,
your
of
ass.
course. And they go like this. And it's like, well, of course, they need to get away from you. And that's the necessary wounding. It's like, okay, you need to understand that this isn't your little boy anymore. This is a man, and you need to let him go. And you need to have the mindset shift and get out of this he's my little boy mindset and begin to understand that you are no longer a mother to a boy. You are a mother to a man, and you have to understand that you have to have these healthy boundaries with him and understand that he's an adult now.
I think about, as you're saying this, I think there's two things. One of them, the negative impact that has on that young man later on in life with relationships. You can't fully have a romantic relationship, a love interest, a true love interest because of that. Because then the mom comes in probably and is very overpowering. And who does he love? Who does he love more?
Right. So here's the the boy nature. The boy nature is to protect mom. So
Right.
like around 9 or 10, it's not unusual for boys to want to make mom happy, and that's
Right.
that's part of growing up. And so I want to make mom happy. I want to protect her. So of course, if she's bad mouthing dad, then the boy becomes an enemy to the father and tries to protect the mother. Right. And that happens. And so he grows up and he's now pleasing his mom. And then one day she gets pissed off at him and says, you're just like your dad. And she had been, bad mouthing him the whole time. And of course the boy is thinking, I want to protect her. And all of a sudden she turns on him and he starts to feel bad about that. And so what's he try to do? He tries to make her happy again, and he tries to please her. And that's her way of controlling him. And so eventually, as he matures and grows up and he's pushing away from mom, and then he finds a girl and he thinks, okay, I'm going to go out and have a girlfriend. And then of course he just transfers his mother to the girl and starts thinking of her and seeing her in it's a transference, as we call it, in the light of my mom. And whatever issue that he has not resolved with his mother, it just gets transferred to the next woman in his life. And this is why so many men are having problems with dating and relationships with women. It's because they haven't resolved that separation, that clear separation. And when young men don't separate cleanly from their mothers and have a healthy separation, identity separation, what happens is they're still enmeshed and they're still plugged into their mom, and then they just try to get away from her by going to the next woman, and they find the same woman because they're familiar with the personality traits of the mom, and that's what looks familiar. So they look for those traits in another woman. They find that woman, but they can never, because they're trying to fix this, they can never really completely understand, okay, this is my girlfriend or my wife, and I just need to focus on her. And this is where mothers come in a lot of times and wreak havoc on marriages. It's a real issue. I mean, I could go on for hours on this issue because it is. I see it more prevalent in society today than I've ever seen it.
Why do you think?
I think it's because this is where I have a little bit of beef with the 90s psychology that went on. This, sort of helicopter parenting, safe words, safe room, participation trophies that went on into the 2000s. All that BS that actually made children more dependent on their parents because their kids weren't able to, be free-range children. They had to be, under, stranger danger and always watching out for all the bad people in the world. And, mom, helicoptering over, and then mom's becoming bulldozers, and sometimes dads do, but most of the time it's just mothers. And so these boys become neurotic, they become super anxious, and they can't make decisions on their own without doubting their own decisions. And so when they get out into the real world, they're really paralyzed. And so this whole generation, I believe it's because of the overindulgence and over-smothering of children that now we have this generation of highly anxious, highly depressed kids, both boys and girls.
That goes back to that boy nature protecting mom. And I imagine they just continue that as they get older and older and older.
Yes, and he's afraid to hurt her. So when we go back to necessary wounding, sometimes I coach guys, I say, this is going to hurt, but your surgeon has to cut you open in order to take out whatever disease there is in your inside and then sew you back up. That hurts, but it's healing. And if you really want to have a better relationship with your mother, you're going to have to do things that she's going to say is hurting her, but that's not what you're doing. You're actually separating from her and making the relationship, you want to make the relationship with your mother healthier, and she's going to fight sometimes to keep you just as you are, a little boy in a man's body. So better do it now than later, because it'll get worse if you don't. And so you have to separate from her. And I have guys who literally have to say, okay, if you can't respect my boundaries and if you can't understand that I'm not that little boy anymore, we won't be talking for a while. And that's hard.
Yeah.
Especially if he was her little man or her surrogate husband or her emotional support, then that makes it hard for him because he feels like he's betraying his mother, or he'll start to feel, a lot of these guys will have guilt complexes over this. And I'm like, well, that's because you need healing too. This relationship has gotten to the point where it's unhealthy. And, your mom is unhealthy, you're unhealthy. And if you're going to get healthy, it's going to break the relationship that you have currently, and you're going to have to move towards health. And if she moves towards health, that's great. If she doesn't, that's not your responsibility. So what does health look like? Health means healthy separation, healthy identity. You have your own identity apart from your parents now, and you need to live your life based on who you are, not on what they told you should be because it suited them and met their needs. Mothers could do so much better if they would just understand part of the developmental process of their own children. I don't understand the courts sometimes. They think that mothers know it all and fathers have no clue, but that's just not the case. A lot of times mothers don't understand child development in a healthy way. They filter their needs through their children and try to get their needs met. And if they take an adversarial role with their fathers, then they're definitely co-opting the children in the war. I just encourage mothers to understand that your children need to leave you, and you need to let them go. And your children need to have their own separate identities from you. And it doesn't mean that they don't love you. As a matter of fact, the true, genuine understanding of love is to let them go and let them blossom into the human being that they are meant to be, and they'll come back, and you will feel proud of your children when they separate from you and they're able to fly on their own and handle life on their own. But and they don't need you all the time. You need to let them out into the world and let them fly and be free. And you will help them by doing that. But if you hold on to them, you're going to impair them and sometimes disable them. And that's, to me, the biggest problem that I see.